Hey everyone, great to be here. So today we're going to talk about the future of work, and it's definitely a topic that I think a lot of companies are very interested in right now. And I think there are some companies that are kind of doing some really interesting things here, and there are some fields of work that are very interesting to automate, and some that are kind of a little more simple. Today we're going to focus more on the complex types of work, and what we think the future kind of is going to look like for the more complex types of work versus more simple types of work. We're going to talk about sort of how the freelance economy impacts that, and how tools and technologies like artificial intelligence can influence that as well. So as technologists, we like to ask ourselves the question, how will technology transform work? Because technology is our tool, and we've seen technology transform work dramatically. But the first question to ask ourselves is what kind of work do we think technology can plausibly transform? So I'll put us in the context of the US Census Bureau here. So we're looking at the services economy of the United States, $13.6 trillion economy. So this is all the money that people spend in the following industries, from the top: professional services, information, finance. So I've oriented this a little differently than you'll typically see the chart. We're looking at this from work that's more knowledge-based, work that's sort of a softer skill, what some might call white-collar work, down towards more physical work. So you know, what you could call more blue-collar work, that sort of thing. So physical work is obviously a lot harder to automate, right? One of the last things that's going to be automated is the job of a maid, for example. Doing sort of maid work, janitorial work. It's a very highly complex thing, right? You go up to the top, and what we might call a more complex type of work is actually easier to automate because so much of it goes through digital tools. So today we're actually going to focus more on sort of what's near-term automatable, which is knowledge work, and I'm going to zoom in on the professional services sector. So looking at that, I think we can all sort of imagine startups that could be founded in these various areas. You can imagine automating computer work, legal work, consulting, engineering. There are already companies in some of these areas right now, but I don't think we've seen yet too large of a transformation here. So I want to, like I said, I want to drill in this more complex type of work. We've got what we would consider highly advanced marketplaces like Postmates, Uber, eBay is a very old marketplace. These marketplaces are, as I said, on the simpler side. We're talking about smaller transactions, closer to $20, $50. Knowledge work transactions that we were talking about a minute ago, so accounting, a legal project, a software engineering project, creative agency, a consulting firm, these are more on the higher end. We're talking 10,000, 20,000, even up to 100,000 or $1 million. So this type of knowledge work is 1,000 to 10,000 times the complexity of a simpler transaction, like an Uber ride, like staying at an Airbnb, something like that. So how is that type of work going to change? That's a bit of a more interesting question. Looking at services 1.0 versus 2.0, right now services tend to be lower cost. We're talking about very sort of one-to-one delivery mechanics. Like I said, drivers and riders, buyers and sellers. Shorter delivery time. When I take an Uber, it's pretty much immediately delivered to where I am, and the project completes immediately, right? It was a ride that might take 20 minutes. The business impact of something like Uber or eBay is relatively low. And it's actually a lot easier to automate this type of work, as you can imagine. Uber is already pretty close to being automated. Once they get a self-driving car working, which a number of different people have a solution for, there's almost no further automation you can do on driving around. At that point, you already see them talking about literally flying cars, jetpacks, crazy things like that. And I guess after that, there's teleportation, but which is probably not going to be an easy problem to solve. But for services 2.0, this is where we see a few more challenges to automate that are actually achievable near term. So this is, again, higher cost work, one-to-many distribution. So this is where, to deliver a $20,000 knowledge work project, I'm probably working with several freelancers, not just one freelancer. So there's a little bit more complexity to how that team is managed. The delivery time is going to be longer, and of course, the business impact is going to be higher. So concretely, how is work going to change? What we're starting to see is marketplaces that transcend the simple, transcend the obvious, where the supply side is curated. I go on the marketplace, and I know I'm going to get something great. The marketplace, the delivery is distributed. right? So the service isn't being delivered by an individual person. It's being delivered by a group of people. It could be all over the world. It's delivered on demand, and it's data optimized. Data from previous marketplace transactions is used to make future transactions more efficient, more effective. You could imagine a service as simple in the legal case as push a button, file a lawsuit. What if I could push a button to do my taxes? Push a button to get blueprints for an architectural firm, or push a button to get software. In the future, we'll see freelancers and AI tools cross-fade into each other, roughly like this, right? I don't think people are ever going to go to zero for certain industries. So maybe this blue line going down to zero should be a little higher than zero. But people will be massively augmented by tools. Some VC firms that have a thesis here call it man-machine symbiosis. So the way people work today, again, is if you imagine a project, so this isn't Nuba Ride, we're talking about a more complex piece of knowledge work. I've got multiple stages, which you could call plan, design, and build. So the blue dots here are humans. Today, people do the work. Tomorrow, machines will replace individual parts of the transaction. And over time, machines for certain types of projects could do almost the entire project. This is where you're seeing massive economic value creation with knowledge work. You're seeing a $20,000 project that could be done for an extremely low cost. Services firms could have software margins in the future, which is a pretty incredible thing to think about. So, looking at sort of the comical version of this, in the past, we would use one tool to complete a task. These days, in many cases, we use a chain of tools. So whether you do marketing automation or sales, with Salesforce, you have a whole app store worth of tools on top of Salesforce. And then salespeople might be using email tools to track who opens and closes their emails. So they're using a chain of tools to complete their task. And as you can see now, we're able to do much more complex work with that. In the future, the person becomes part of the tool. The tools are actually augmenting the person and making them better. And then there's this dystopian future where the machines don't need us anymore. Kind of zooming in on this human in the loop model, again, this is, now we have a person in the loop. The human is more so doing micro work. Transactions, whatever part has to be done by the human is actually being parceled out to them bit by bit. You could look at it as the machine assisting the human, or even the other way around for certain types of projects. Once the machine starts doing more of the work, maybe the human is assisting the machine in a sense. So you could imagine a future work interface that looks like this. My name is John. I'm a freelancer. I've made $1,400 today, and I'm a tax accountant, right? So I get this message. The client wants a tax deduction on maid services. The home is also used for work. Is that okay? So I can say yes, or I can ask how they allocate the space. And maybe the machine doesn't know how to do this yet, so I kind of have to train it, right? You could imagine a legal trial. I'm working with a new partner. They want full indemnification. What should we say? We have a couple options down here. And in the case of a software development project, maybe the machine doesn't know which feature to build first. So I can tell it, oh, actually, you should build login before profile pages because you can't really have profiles unless you're able to log in, right? So breaking the future of work down kind of into two areas. Let's look at freelance marketplaces, how those are going to change, and then sort of the work automation and tools piece. So for freelance marketplaces, why is this interesting? Well, for one thing, 50% of Americans will be in the freelance workforce by 2025. And it's only going to accelerate from there. Now, I don't think this means that 50% of people will be full-time freelancers, but many will be. So if you're starting a freelance marketplace, and many of you in the audience may be entrepreneurs, you might be asking yourself, how do I attract the best freelancers? Well, it's a couple things, right? You need to create the best place to work, for one thing. It's got to be a set of freelancing tools, a situation that they enjoy. If you do that, you'll attract the best people, and with the best people, you can build the best service. So if you want to build the best place to work, you have to understand what freelancers want. Freelancers care about painless payouts, right? They're sick of running their own operation and not getting paid. They care about clear specs, want to work on great teams. They want to do interesting work. That's one thing that I think a lot of marketplaces kind of fall short on, particularly marketplaces that want to attract higher-end knowledge workers, somebody who's been to a prestigious institution or works at a prestigious place or whatever it is. It's a little harder to attract that talent, so you've got to have interesting work. In some cases, maybe software engineering in particular, engineers don't want to work with clients. It's better if they can just kind of write code and get paid. So minimal client interaction can be a big draw. So let's look at kind of 5 different ways that that freelance is going to change. So one is sourcing, right? let's say I have this freelancer, and I know that she's incredible. She's the gold standard. She's what I want. I can take her resume or her profile. I can compare that to other profiles online, and I'm able to see who's likely to do a great job. This is a simple off-the-shelf machine learning problem to take one resume or 100 resumes of good workers and compare them with 10,000 or 100,000 resumes, and then classify those 100,000 resumes. So I can see here we've decided that the first 2 workers are going to be great because they look like this first one. Screening. Once I get freelancers into the process, how do I decide who's actually good? Well, the thing about any product that intends to scale exponentially is you have to have all the pieces be exponential, right? So the right way to do screening is to have the actual network screen, because if the network is screening, then the network grows at a percentage of the network's existing size, so it ends up being an exponential process. So if you have the network do the work, have automated or written tests, you can aggregate the results at the end, and you can end up screening and growing a supply base rather exponentially. It's also a great way for freelancers to earn passive income. This has been proven, I think, on a variety of different forums, particularly in the gaming community. It's been proven that gamers on online forums are willing to moderate for free. They don't even need if they can get status, that's good enough for them. So if you not only give freelancers status of being interviewers, but also pay them, you see that freelancers are willing to do a lot more than you'd expect. So once you get freelancers in, creating a sense of community is important, right? Going from freelance to, or going from a full-time job to being a freelancer, you lose a lot of things. One thing you lose is that sense of community. So if you're trying to replicate, in some sense, the experience of being an employee in a freelance, in a freelance product, creating a sense of community is important. So one idea is, divide a community. You could imagine these as Slack rooms. You could divide by the project they're working on. It could be a website, an ad campaign, trademark dispute. Divide by geography, by role, or by personal interest. Once you have freelancers, one thing you're able to do with freelancers that you can't do with full-time employees is you're able to measure their performance on a much more granular level. The resume of the future is not self-reported, it's measured. So I can go on LinkedIn right now and I can say I'm the CEO of Facebook, which obviously isn't true. But I can't, you can't fool data. So in the future with freelancers and with a more transactional type of work, we'll have data on exactly what people are doing, the level of customer satisfaction, were they on time or not, what was the quality level of the work they delivered, et cetera. Uber has this type of data for their drivers. So you could imagine a system where if you're new or if you're sort of an okay worker, you only get small projects. As you get better on the scale, you get larger projects, which is what motivates you, gamifies you to advance. And when you're one of the top freelancers, that's when you get VIP projects. So finally, management's going to change as well. And this is one thing that's part of being a full-time employee that you don't get in the freelance economy, is a sense of career progression. Freelancers want a sense of career progression as well. So you could imagine that if as a freelancer I could do 10 projects a year as an IC and I could earn, let's say, 200K. But as a manager, I could oversee 10 projects or oversee 10 ICs that are each doing 10 projects. I get a smaller percentage of each project, but on a whole, since I'm overseeing an aggregate of 100 projects, I can make more money. And that extends up to directors and vice presidents, where in a model like this, a vice president in a freelance workforce could make $1 million a year because they're now overseeing about 10,000 projects. So how is work going to be automated? I like to think of 3 laws of automation, which I think encompass a lot of how this is going to happen. Number 1, work is measurable by data. Number 2, that data has patterns. And number 3, those patterns are exploitable to find new reliabilities and efficiencies. So what do I mean by measurable? You could imagine a data structure that describes a freelance worker. So that's people up here. So you have ratings, skills. You have a list of projects that they've worked on in the past. For each project, you know basic things like name, duration, and cost. But you also know how well that project went. You know, did the client like it? Was it delivered on time? And you know what people worked on it. So now if you give me a person, I can go look back to their project history, and I can tell you how good of a worker they are. Activity is another factor as well. If you show me one person that's on one project, I can now show you 10,000 to 100,000 data points on exactly how that worker behaves. And for a work product, you could imagine saving the work product of all these freelancers and reusing it for future projects. So this is an example of activity data. If I'm a project manager, my activity happens on Trello, on Asana. Communication happens on Slack. If I work in finance, I probably work with QuickBooks. So work is already measurable to a very great extent. We already know what people do. Every action leaves a digital footprint when your workers are using cloud-based products such as Salesforce or the following. So this data has patterns. So right here, I see, let's say this is a particular project. I see that this is the frequency of emails that were sent. And I see that in week 3, this dropped off. And there are 0 emails sent in week 4, let's say between the client and the worker. And I can see that as the email frequency goes down, the number of days late goes up, and the customer satisfaction goes down. So you could imagine using this data pattern to detect when something was going to go wrong in advance. So to that point, exploiting these data patterns, how do we do this? Well, let's say I'd like to build a quote for a project. A client wants to do a certain legal project, and they're wondering how much that'll cost. Well, I can take this new project, look at similar past projects using that project data structure, and I can figure out what the best quote is, automatically without a human in the loop. If I'd like to build a team for this lawsuit or this tax project or a software development project, you could imagine a new project comes in, I look at similar projects, see which ones went well, and then I can extract the teams from those similar projects and find the team that's the best to do this project. You could imagine a worker assistant as well. So let's say I'm a designer or I'm a management consultant. You can look at my activity. Again, this is the digital footprints that are left as I work. You can find similar activity for other projects. So someone working on the same project as me went through the following steps, and you can recommend the suggested step. Because you've seen the future. You know what they're going to have to do because you've seen similar projects. And then to go with our example of activity, watching someone's activity patterns, if activity looks bad, if my project starts to look like projects that went sour in the past, you could imagine raising a red flag, and now customer support's automatically contacted. So right now, I'm coming to you with these examples from personal experience. So I run a company called Gigster, and we do software development on demand at Gigster. So if you want a website or mobile app, you just push a button and we put a team together. We do these type of projects, mobile apps, websites, particularly specializing in new technologies because, like I said, freelancers like interesting work. So this Google engineer, Facebook engineer that's sitting at home, if they're going to work nights and weekends, they want to be doing a virtual reality project or AI, machine learning. They want to play with Google TensorFlow or IBM Watson or some drone or 3D printing software, right? They were probably going to go home and do a side project anyways. If they can get paid for it, even better. So new technology is an area that we see a lot of traction. Couple numbers on us. We're working on a large number of projects in parallel, 250 right now, average size around $50,000. Now, what's interesting about this isn't so much necessarily that scale, it's that we're doing that with a core team of 30 people. So, you've probably heard of companies that have that level of scale, but not very many that have that few people in the core team. And the way we do it is everything I talked about a minute ago. It's all of those economies of scale and leverage points that we're able to find by using freelancers and augmenting them with intelligent tools. And it actually works. So these aren't 250 projects that we're totally screwing up. The customer satisfaction on these is surprisingly high, higher than what you might see from a typical agency or development shop. So we've done projects. These are real examples. Like we built software that powers flying cars. We've built ordering systems for robotic restaurants. There's actually one opening near you soon. We built shopping recommendation apps. This is kind of the standard thing we tend to see, and interesting projects like 3D credit card visualization. So it sort of runs the whole gamut for us. Anyhow, hope all that was interesting. I know that all of you have your own businesses, and you're going to find ways that both sort of a freelance labor force and work automation are relevant in your case. So if I can help you with any of that, I love this topic. I'm super interested in this, so feel free to send me a note anytime about anything. Roger@gigster.com. And I guess we'll get into questions now.
All right, so the top question we have so far is, do you believe at one point machines will take over jobs that humans usually do? Well, they already are starting to. I mean, press releases that I get, some of them have been written by robots. So, no, seriously.
Yeah, no, I've seen those too.
Yeah.
I think so, and I think as I showed earlier, there's a spectrum of work from easily automatable to not easily automatable. So, for example, there used to be taxi dispatchers who would sit on a phone and a CB radio and they'd send you a taxi. Well, now Uber does that with an algorithm. So we're going to see fields, we're going to see jobs like middle management replaced early. Anybody who wasn't adding a tremendous amount of value, no offense to middle managers, will get first replaced by software. Particularly people that use a lot of digital tools, so accountants, project managers, certain types of software developers will be on the earlier side of automation. And the later side of automation is more physical or more creative work. So what you might see designers doing, what you might see brand marketers doing, or somebody who comes in and does housekeeping. That's extremely hard to automate.
Yes, no offense to lawyers, but a lot of their work is being automated too. So if you're a lawyer who does basic tasks, your job may be extinct soon. Working on so many software projects with different teams, how do you keep quality up?
It's a great question. So a lot of it is, it's sort of scaling best practices across projects. Managing freelancers who are trying to deliver high complexity work can be like herding cats if you don't have the right tools. So we're able to use tools like the supervisor that I showed earlier with those little colored squares, where we're actually watching project activity across all of the projects, and we're able to kind of see icebergs before we hit them. So we can see if there are a lot of bugs on a project, we can see if a customer satisfaction is falling off, and we'll have people from our full-time team actually parachute in and handle those projects in particular where they have to. A lot of it's about finding great people too. Right? You could imagine that none of these tools would be necessary if we just had the best freelancers in the world that would just automatically never make a mistake. So a lot of it kind of happens at the talent screening level, but obviously some bad apples get in, so we have to be robust to the various failure modes that can happen. We could even have some MIT-trained Google, Facebook engineer, whatever, who comes in, looks really good on paper, but they're not reliable. They're not finishing projects on time because they keep getting pulled into full-time projects at work. So you know, I wouldn't say this is a solved problem yet, but there are a lot of off-the-shelf machine learning techniques you can use if you plug the right data in and you look for the right signals.
All right, so going to ask you to be a futurist here and peer into your crystal ball and think about if you take the technology to its full potential, how do you envision the workplace of 2050?
Contrary to other freelance platforms or people focused on automation, I'm not going to say that automation won't replace jobs. I think automation will replace some jobs. So I think the economy of the future looks, I think it needs an economic vehicle like basic income to be sort of resilient and maintain quality of life across the areas that will be automated. I don't necessarily know that we're going to create enough new physical or new creative work to outstrip automation. One of the challenges there is that the amount of new work that needs to be done isn't increasing exponentially. However, the automation potential is increasing exponentially. So it's a little hard to catch up with that. There's typical arguments around, oh, people said this in the Industrial Revolution, and look at us now, we have jobs. Technology is accelerating a little faster now than it was in the Industrial Revolution. So some of those arguments start to break down. Not all of them. There will be new types of jobs. There will always be things that people have to do, but I think we will see less jobs and more of the automatable jobs will be automated, certainly by 2025. But I think with a lot of things, the world will change less than we all think. I doubt we'll have flying cars necessarily even by then.
Okay. I was about to read a different question, but a different one. Skip to the top here. How do you find, keeps on skipping around. How do you measure customer satisfaction?
So we let customers tell us how they feel, for one thing. I think that there are a few dimensions to customer satisfaction. There's explicit versus implicit. So explicit customer satisfaction is I tell you, I am satisfied. Like on Uber, I say 5 stars for the rider, for the driver. But let's say I start using Uber less and less often, but I'm saying 5 stars for every ride. Well, I'm implicitly telling you I'm not happy. I'm implicitly telling you something, right? So I think there's explicit versus implicit satisfaction. And then there's objective versus subjective customer satisfaction. Objective customer satisfaction is a number that I can just look at, and I can see the level of satisfaction. I can see the frequency of emailing, something like that. Subjective is more so I might write some long-winded message to customer support that sort of has to be processed or has to be broken down. So there are definitely different dimensions to it. Right now, we focus mostly on the explicit and implicit aspects that are objectively measurable.
All right, how do you find your freelancers?
Well, you'd be surprised. Recruiting people for the kind of work that we do high-end software development, design, project management, there are actually a lot of really great, really qualified people who want to do work on the side. The best knowledge workers, they're so good at their job and so passionate that they're going home and they're doing knowledge work on the side. I used to be a software engineer and I worked 80 hours a week at my job, and on top of that I literally did 30 hours a week as side projects. Because most software engineers, even at a company like Google, you don't get to work on full stack awesome stuff. You might be working on the settings page for Gmail. You might be stuck on some boring project for 6 months to a year. So you're definitely going to go home and you're going to you always want to be learning new things, right? So we find that if we reach out to one of those engineers and we say, hey, do you want to join Gigster? A lot of the times they're willing to do it. If we said, hey, do you want to quit Google? They're going to archive the message because they get enough recruiter spam, but we're not recruiters. So I think the key is finding people for whom your service or marketplace or whatever is a good value proposition where they're already doing that on the side anyways, going to where those people are and recruiting them.
Well, so where do you go to find them?
One thing we do, and there was a slide on this earlier under sourcing, is we take profiles of people that we know have been successful, and we find lookalike profiles. So you could imagine, not necessarily scraping LinkedIn, 'cause you probably can't do that, but doing sort of a human or manual search or scraping process through LinkedIn. You can use overseas teams to do that. We've used overseas teams in the past to look for certain lookalike profiles that our machine learning has identified will be successful. We have a lot of inbound as well, so there's obviously you can always do marketing and branding, and you can publish stories. What I've seen to be the most compelling message that gets people to apply is just talk about how much money they could make. So we had a Forbes article literally last week where we talked about how developers can make $500,000 a year on our platform, which is true, and we had like 1,000 people sign up. So when you don't speak in generalities and abstract terms, somebody just sees a number, it's a lot more compelling.
That's the saying, money talks.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on show impact with KPIs? In other words, how do you merge KPIs and learnings?
Let's see, show impact with KPIs. So one thing we try to do is, and I don't think I'm understanding the question right, but as we're sort of, the sort of feedback loop that optimizes our process takes data signals from all over the place. We look at projects that didn't do well and we try to optimize future projects so the same thing doesn't happen. I think one of the biggest levers we've seen there that's not fancy at all, and this isn't sexy, is just be very restrictive up front about what type of projects we take. So we won't just build anything or work with any client. There's certain clients where we say, hey, you sound great, let's talk later when what you have is better defined. We also cheat a little bit, and we scope every project up front. We don't do hourly work, we don't do staff augmentation. Everything at Gigster is fixed price. So we know up front what your project is, and we're responsible and we're able to sort of automate everything that's happening in your project. The more we know up front, the better job we can do. So we've tried to sort of front load a lot of that. And if you come to me right now and you say, I want to build a $300,000 project with you, I would get excited, but I might say, let's do a $10,000 discovery project first. Make sure we really know what you want, and then we'll do the other 290 or 300 later. So we've tried to move some projects, move the scoping ahead. That's sort of, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's sort of the general philosophy. Apart from all the fancy machine learning stuff where we can detect errors before they happen, et cetera.
Okay, all right, this is going to have to be the final question. What's your opinion on the API economy?
API economy, interesting. I think I did a talk about this, or was supposed to, so I should have an opinion. I think that sort of thing is interesting. We definitely use like Twilio, and we pay them a lot of money, and our customers pay them a lot of money. We end up being a channel partner for a lot of APIs. So the way we think of it is we have like an app store that if you're a client of ours, let's say we build your website, well, you might want analytics. So we'll plug in Mixpanel for you, and we'll be a Mixpanel reseller. I think as an API economy company, you obviously, just like with any other business, you have to be solving a big problem for people, and you have to be better than the competition. So assuming you have a great product and a great service, if you want to grow that business, I think channel opportunities are great. If you're not going to go through channel and you want to do sort of you want to sort of acquire customers in more of a consumer sense, you have to build a sexy product that really speaks to developers. So two products I can think of that really did this extremely well. One is Firebase, and one is Stripe. I know the founder of Firebase, and what they were trying to do was basically build this product that was just a drop-in, sexy, easy way to add real-time performance. And Stripe, I don't know how many of you have integrated PayPal in the past. Integrating PayPal, it took me 4 or 5 days one time, and I've been a software engineer for like 25 years, right? I've been engineering for 25 years. It took me 4 days to put it in. Stripe takes like 5 minutes. So if you can make your API easy to use or sexy, even if the web page for it is beautiful, no joke, like that actually matters a lot to the engineers that use your product. And then if you get more engineers using it, you'd be surprised that a lot of businesses don't care really what APIs they use. They let their engineers make that decision as long as the pricing model's there. So what you end up seeing is the engineers that get passionate about your API will drive a ton of business for you. So I don't know if that answers it, but hope that helps.
All right, great advice, great perspectives. Roger Dickey with Gigster, everybody.
Yep, thank you all.
Thank you very much.